Hello and welcome to this video. My name's Beckham. The subject here, as you can see on screen, is making a composite. One of the ways to bring our knowledge of layers up to speed is to go through a series of projects just like this. It's going to take us into layers, of course. It also means we have to remove or mask pixels from around the subject, and there's a number of ways we can do this. What you're viewing here is the image we're going to use, but I've opened this up into Adobe Camera Raw. It doesn't really need a great deal of editing because we're going to turn both the statue, the people and the foreground into a solid silhouette. So if we're going to do that and we're working in RAW, we may as well make sure that we make the selection as easy as possible by perhaps using the raw sliders to help. But before we start, I want to go into the edge of the wing here, quite large, because if we're going to cut a subject out, what we ought to be doing is also thinking about the color fringing, chromatic aberration. It may be a good idea in some circumstances. It's not likely to be a great problem here with what I plan to do, but it is a problem in other cutouts. Now we can eradicate that by going to our lens corrections in Camera Raw, ticking the box to remove chromatic aberration, and you can see it does a brilliant job. I'll also enable my profile corrections. I'll zoom out so you can see what happens. It just corrects for any known distortion in the lens. Going back to my basic tab, if I'm going to cut out this particular shape and the people and the foreground, it may be a good idea if I can make the sky a bit lighter and the blacks a bit darker. So I can do that, I think, by raising the whites, raising the highlights, maybe even the exposure a little bit, taking down the blacks and taking down the shadows. So I think already I've made my life just a little bit easier. If you look at the statue, you can see that it appears to be falling forward a little bit, probably due to my location looking up with a wide angle lens. So I'm going to try and straighten this up using the transform tools inside Adobe Camera Raw. We'll find them up at the top left. I can select them and the options open on the right hand side. I'm going to use this option, which is the guided option. I'm going to draw a line, click and drag it down to say to Photoshop I want that more or less straight, and I also want maybe his feet straight, and you can see exactly what it does. But now he seems to be leaning back a little bit, so if I pick up the pin here and just rock it to the right, you can see I can fine-tune it until I'm happy with the result. I think that looks okay to me. I'm going to open this up into Photoshop. Now, given that I've made the sky as light as I can and the dark areas as dark as I can, it wouldn't be unreasonable for us to reach for the magic wand in a situation like this. So I'm going to pick up the magic wand. The tolerance is usually set to something like 32. I've increased it a little bit, but you don't have to worry too much because I'm going to click once. Then I'm going to make sure that I've got this option checked. This allows me to add one selection to another. Once I check that, you'll notice a little plus will appear alongside the magic wand. So I can now click around the image, and within quite a short time we should have most, if not all of this picked up. A few little stubborn bits. We could pick up a different tool to do this, but to be honest, I think we more or less have it. One thing to watch out for though is little areas such as these. So I'll just pick up the gaps between the young lad's legs, but I think my selection is fully made. It pays to have a good look around the outer edge, but we're going to be making this cut out with a mask anyway, so we've got some way back if we do spot a mistake a little later. Now the next thing I'd like to do is just remove the bushes that are sticking up just behind the two walkers and also the little bit on the right. To do that, I would be picking up my polygonal lasso tool and making sure that I've got, once again, the icon checked to add one selection to another. And there again we see the little plus sign. So what I can do now is zoom in to the area I want to work. I just want to add all of this rough area here to my selection. So if I start my selection up here and bring it down to the edge, I can move along, click, 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 move up around the edge, and I can add one selection to another. So I've just removed all of the bushes. If I hold the space bar, I can click and drag to whiz over to the other side, because I'd like to do the same here. Starting up there, down to the edge of the hill, small steps as I take the curve, click, 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 and then up and around, and our selection is complete. Now we can soften the edge of the selection around the statue, and we do this with select and mask. All I want is about 1 pixel of feather here, so I can just dial it in rather than using the slider. I'm going to output that to a selection. I could make a mask with a new layer, but I'm just going to choose selection from here and click OK. Because when I add a layer mask from down at the bottom left of the layers, it's going to add the mask in a slightly odd way, but we can recover from it pretty easily. So let me add the mask and you'll see what I mean. Rather than the sky disappearing, leaving the subject, we've got the reverse that's happened, and it just means that I've got to invert this particular layer. I can do that with my image menu, but it's a quick shortcut, Control I for invert, and all I'm doing is turning what's black on the mask white and what's white black. At this stage I would be saving this as an ongoing project, and I've called mine Angel Stage 1 because I want to save both the image and also the mask that goes with it. Now, as you can see by the spinning round of the screen, I've opened up the sky I'd like to use in the composite, so I need to make a layered stack of the two images. I can drag the Angel Stage 1 from the top of the screen via the tab, and I can click, drag and drop either the thumbnail from the layers or the image itself, it doesn't matter which, into the sky image, and I can shut the Angel of the North down because I've got it saved. With the Move tool selected, I can drag this into position. Now you'll notice we've got a couple of little white specks around the sky here, probably a slight deficiency in the selection I made. Let me zoom in up to the top first of all and have a look at these, because if I select my mask and I select black as my foreground colour, a standard soft edge brush, flow rate and opacity is going to be up at 100%. I think I can just wipe these away pretty quickly. This one is going to be taken care of when we flood this shape with black, but we do have one down here that I need to deal with. I'll get it nice and large on screen, something like that. I'm going to make my brush very small, and I can just now repair my mask here. Just take your time to do these little things. They'll only take a minute or two, a few seconds actually. That looks okay, and if I see any more, I'll have a look at those in a moment. What I'd like to do next is to check the composition, and I can do that using my crop tool, because when I select it and click into the picture, the rule of thirds grid appears, and I can see that in an ideal world it would be nice if my Angel of the North was moved a little bit to the right. So I'm going to do that by removing the overlay, selecting the Move tool, and I'm going to click and drag the picture to the right, something like that, and I'll check again with the crop just to make sure I've got it right, and I think that's just about perfect. Now I would like to do a little cropping of the image. I think I've got rather too much on the base, particularly as I'm going to make that solid black. And if I bring it up, I get a much more oblong shot, which I think is probably more attractive given the shape of the statue, of course, but also it puts the vertical and horizontal lines of my grid there, strong part of the image, right on the head of the statue. So I'm going to hit the tick to commit that crop, but of course it gives me a couple of problems. The first one is I've got the edge of the frame showing here, and it's left me a little white line right the way up there. That's no problem. We can just use our brush and switch to the mask to repair that. If we go back to the layers and select the mask, select black as our foreground color, and our brush, I'll use the brush with 100% flow and 100% opacity. I can make the brush a little bigger. I can just brush down here, and I can remove that without any problem at all. But now I need to fill in the little gap on the left hand side. Copy and paste should do that pretty well, but I think I'm at the stage now where I'm willing to merge my mask with the image. So just before I do that, probably a good idea to save this once more as a different project. So with my project saved at least twice, I can apply the layer mask to the image. I can right click the mask to do that and just choose apply layer mask, and you can see what it does. It leaves all the transparent areas that we require transparent completely free, but it does apply the mask. Now we do have to do a little bit of copy and paste down on the left hand side, so making sure I've got my statue selected, I need to select a tool to do that, and I think the lasso tool will do it pretty well. I just need to make a shape around there, maybe soften it just a little bit of feather on it, not much. 23, 24 pixels should be enough. I can now copy that to a new layer with Ctrl J, and if I select the Move tool from the top of the toolbox, I can slide it left and move it into place. Zoom in and have a good look, just in case you need to nudge it down as I'm doing here with my down arrow keys. But there we have the foreground repaired. What I'm going to do next then is to place these two layers together. Now this is where we would use the command up top right here, which is merge rather than flatten. If I flatten the image, it's going to put all of the layers together, but I don't want to flatten all of the layers. I need to keep my sky separate for a while. So if I just select the two layers, the patch that I've just made and the statue, I can right click or go to the top right of the layers palette and choose merge layers, and it will merge just those two I've selected. Now we can really finish off our image by flooding the shape of the Angel of the North, the two people and the foreground with black to give us a good strong silhouette. Now to do that we need to go up and check this little box here. If I hover over this and keep still, we should see a tooltip crop up that says this is going to lock transparent pixels. What it's telling us is that if we flooded that with black with the lock turned on, and if I click it, it'll appear on the right hand side of the thumbnail, then any color that I flood into this layer is only going to record on the pixels that are currently there. Best demonstrated probably rather than explained, so just making sure that we've got a black as our foreground color, I can hit Alt Backspace, and there we have our solid silhouette, and when we see that against the sky, I hope you'll agree it looks pretty impressive. Now I've just saved my project as Angel Stage 3, so I've got it in all stages of its production. So for now, as long as I'm happy with the work I've done so far, then of course at some stage we would need to flatten the image to complete it. Now we can take just a few seconds to view the image full screen. Once I have my black and white composite complete and saved onto my hard drive, I do like to experiment with one or two derivatives. This gives it a much cooler winter type of effect. Or we can experiment with some more dramatic colour.